rock beds picture, you have these really nice, neat edges. That planting looks pretty young. It's going to grow up and get full probably and a little unruly. But that rock bed and the nice mowed lawn will really keep it looking orderly, which is something a lot of us value in our landscape plantings. Mowed borders, again, you could mow right up in the top picture, or the two pictures on the left, both of them have some mowed borders where you can really show that this is intentional. This isn't just a bunch of weeds growing, right? You mow up right to the edge and keep it nice and neat and orderly. Or of course you can do paths that wind through and kind of show some level of intentionality and orderliness as well with a rock path, or here a kind of stone path. So a bunch of resources. It'll be hard for you to write these down here, but if you want to take a screenshot or snap a photo with your phone, if you're looking for, what is native, what plants are present, on the island, in Door County, I'd encourage you to start with the top few resources here. So WIS Flora, Wisconsin Flora, the herbarium. If you just search WIS Flora, you'll find it online. This basically has a list of every documented plant that's found in Door County. So if you're wondering like, hey, is Drummond's aster found in Wisconsin? Is it found in Door County? You can do a search for it on their page. And you can even go and find Door County and then it'll list for you every plant that's found in Door County. That's kind of an amazing resource. Number two is a article that I really like called Flora and Vegetation of the Grand Traverse Islands. So they're really just focusing on all the islands stretching from the UP down to Chambers Island, islands around into the bay. And that has a lot of really specific information too about what's found on Washington Island. So that's a lot of fun to look through. And these are records that are going back. Number 1 and 2 are pulling from records that are going back to the first ecologists and botanists that were exploring this country, looking for, hey, what plants are found in this area. Number 3, DNR Wisconsin Restoration Contractors has a really good list of native nurseries in Wisconsin. So you could check that out. You could follow Wild Ones of Door County. I think they just have a Facebook page. They do share a lot of information, and they have articles that come up in the Door County Pulse, and they get shared on their page. So that's always an interesting checkpoint to see what people are talking about here in our community locally. Anything by Doug Tallamy. So Bringing Nature Home and Living Landscape. Bringing Nature Home is his first text, and then Living Landscape is more directed specifically to people who are trying to install or design landscapes like this. And it's very good for getting some ideas about the kind of woodland landscapes that that I think are right for this area. There's a book called Landscaping with Native Plants of Wisconsin by Lynn Steiner. That's great. And, just going to native plant nurseries and finding out what they recommend planting, because, they've done their research, most of them, hopefully, on what is native and good to grow here. So we're going to talk a little bit. This is kind of design level stuff, and then we're going to get into the practical stuff here in a moment, and then talk about specific plants. So I'd encourage you to think about what are your goals, and think in terms of habitat, even if you're just planting a small area. Or do you want to make a closed canopy forest? Do you want to open woodland or savanna? I think of great examples of woodlands and savannas on the island. It's kind of like ditches and fence rows, right? There's a lot of ecological edge where kind of a meadow or a forest intersect. This is the kind of planting that I want to do. I mean, I sometimes joke that I want my native plantings to be as beautiful as a Door County ditch, because a lot of the ditches have a lot of diversity. A nice herbaceous layer with some shrubs, dogwoods, and whatnot that blend into a forested closed canopy forest. So that's what I'm going for in some of the plantings that I want to install. Or are you going for a prairie or a meadow? So, and think in terms of succession, which is development over time. Trees, shrubs, vines, they produce more shade over time, of course. Annuals will shine out in the first year, but they can give way then to perennials. And perennials that require full sun can start to give way to shade-loving plants, spring ephemerals and the like, that really thrive before the trees leaf out. And you can keep updating your plantings as your plants develop and mature. And I'd say, you know, start with what you have. So if you have a couple plants, if you have a dogwood, even if you don't like the look of it, you know, that dogwood is producing a lot of food for a lot of wildlife. Keep it, you know, start to do some cleaning up around it, and it might, and start to prune it a little bit. It'll probably come back and be a really beautiful plant. And even if it's not beautiful, right, that's not the only goal here. Even the juniper in your field, you know, that juniper is producing berries that cedar waxwings like to eat. So, and it's also, the junipers also serve a function of being kind of nurse plants for trees that can grow up protected from deer browse. So they have their role for sure. Factors in deciding what to plant: sunlight, of course. A good thing to note when a native plant says it needs full sun, that's really, for wild plants, that's really like 6 hours, 6 hours or more. They need about 6 hours plus of full sun. So you don't need all day sun, you know what I mean? And think about seasonal variation. So, you know, spring ephemerals, they thrive because they're getting a lot of sunlight on the forest floor. Even though that area is about to get real shady real quick. So you can think about what, especially with the shade-loving plants and spring ephemerals, where can you plant them where they will get enough sun seasonally to thrive? Soil characteristics: do you have sandy soil or loamy soil? Loamy soil is a little bit more organic matter, usually some clay substrate in the a horizon of the soil. pH: you may need to think about pH, you may not, depending on the plant species you want to plant. What's the behavior of the plant? So is it climbing or spreading? How tall does it get? These are all good things to think about. Depending on the type of planting you want to do, spreading might be a really good thing. You know, like if you have planted, like a perennial sunflower, a native perennial sunflower, a lot of them can be pretty vigorous in a landscape, but you might want that if you want them to compete with some of the vegetation that's already there. And if you're going for more of a wild meadow look for things to fill in. And then what maintenance will it require? Do you need to water? Can you get mulch there if you need to get mulch there? Okay, so how to establish, and I guess the first question is, should you use seeds or plants? And this is a big question. Absolutely different techniques if you're going to do seeds or plants, but you also have more options available if you're looking at seeds, right? If you're going to order seed, you just have more things to choose from. Some of this will come out as we go, but you know, both require some prep of the ground. So if you're starting with sod, you have to do something in all likelihood. If you're going to plant seeds, you can't just throw seeds onto sod. You're just not going to have a lot of success. Whereas with a plant, you can, you know, dig out a little area of sod and try to get rid of the vegetation that's there and stick that guy in the ground, and he's got a good shot at living. And you can also mulch around that to, you know, keep some competition at bay. So you have a little bit more options with preparation when you're planting plants as opposed to seeds. So how to prepare the ground if you're starting with sod: you can mow repeatedly, very short, and then try trampling in some seed. Again, this is not going to work so well, but you'll have a shot, especially like black-eyed Susans, which are pretty competitive. They might have a shot. Tilling multiple times in the spring prior to planting. And you could use herbicide. This is if you're looking at, I don't recommend this, and I don't think most of you would want to do it, but if you feel comfortable with it, you know, this is what a lot of native restorationists actually recommend. So it just depends on what your philosophy is. And as an alternative to herbicide, I like the idea of just smothering. So using cardboard and then wood chips and leaves and grass clippings and garden scraps and even your kitchen scraps. People call this lasagna gardening. You can look into it a little bit more, but that's going to take about a year to prep. So I'd say smothering, tilling, these are options if you're trying to do a larger area. So, and then think about what kind of maintenance is going to be required. So you don't make too much work for yourself. For woody plants, for trees and shrubs, mulch, mulch, mulch. Mulch is so important. Don't mulch too high on the trunk of the tree. Don't do volcano. Think more of a you don't want the mulch coming up to the trunk, basically, but around the plant. So to keep some of the weeds at bay. You can mow regularly if you're dealing obviously with more herbaceous plants like a meadow type planting. You can mow to keep some of the weeds from multiplying, and plant densely. So if you're doing, I just came up with the number 5, but you know, 3+ plants per square foot, you're just going to have more shot of the plants that you want to thrive actually thriving. And if you don't want to work that hard, I would say don't worry about making your plantings perfect. Don't, you know, you can use some mulch to keep some of the grass and stuff that's already there at bay. But you know, if some of it comes through, I'd say, you know, my philosophy is let it come through, especially if your plants are beginning to thrive. Number 4 is a resource, Prairie Moon, Growing Your Prairie. If you do a Google search for that, you'll find a lot of good info on how to do some preparation of your ground. Okay. We will have time to do questions at the end. I was just checking the time there. We're at 10:30, so we're about to begin to talk about some specific plants. How to establish, natives are tough, meaning they're resilient, but they also benefit from a lot of TLC during establishment. I would think of this planting that you want to do as kind of like beginning a garden. You can do it in a very small area. You know, how would you clean out an area to grow a tomato plant? You would get rid of all the other competing soil. You would get a little fresh compost in there likely, make a clean growing bed, water it when it's young, weed out the competition, mulch around it to lock in soil moisture. These are all great things to do with native plants too, in the establishment phase. So, and plant 3 times the density you would want at maturity of planting just to ensure success. So if you want, you know, there's likely you're going to have some loss in the early weeks and months. But they really respond to some TLC. I've helped with a planting here on the island where the individual planting, you know, planted some 100 plants and mulched them and watered very religiously. And those were big bushy plants by the end of the growing season. So they really responded to it very well. Okay, let's talk about where to source plants and seeds. So start with a local nursery. The state forest has trees and shrubs. For them, you have to buy a lot at a time. So a good tree nursery that I've had good luck with is called Chief River Nursery. They're located north of Milwaukee. They have trees and shrubs that are native for up here. You can get